we are going to stand with you.
The death of Mahsa Amini was literally just the cherry on top of 44 years of neglect for human rights and women's rights.
Why are these women burning their hijabs and cutting their hair?
I never imagined that's gonna be the start of this massive movement that actually changed the culture.
We all have to stand up now. We can't let another young woman die because of what she's wearing.
On the 16th of September 2022, a 22-year-old Kurdish woman called Mahsa Amini died in a hospital in Tehran, Iran, while in police custody. Her death sparked anger and protests in the country and quickly spread across the world, from London to New York to Doha to Istanbul. Women burned their headscarves, cut their hair and stood on police cars in some of the biggest protests to happen in Iran for decades. How did Mahsa Amini's death spark a movement across the world calling for women, life and freedom? And importantly, what's changed for women and girls in Iran 1 year on?
We will never go back to the pre-Mahsa time.
Mahsa Amini was from the western city of Saqqez in the Kurdistan province in Iran. So just for some context, for a long time, human rights groups have criticized the Iranian government for its treatment of women and minorities. Under Iranian law, women must cover their hair with a headscarf and wear loose clothes to disguise their figures. If they don't, they could face prison. On the 13th of September 2022, Mahsa visited the capital city of Iran, Tehran, with her family. She was arrested in the city and detained by the country's notorious morality police. They accused her of not wearing her headscarf properly. Mahsa's family say she was beaten by officers in the police van after her arrest. The police force, however, have denied this. Following her arrest, Mahsa was taken to a detention centre, but fell into a coma after collapsing there. She died 3 days later in hospital. The police claimed that Mahsa suffered a sudden heart failure while she was held at a facility to be educated. But Mahsa's father said that his daughter suffered injuries after being detained and had no prior health problems. Around 10,000 people showed up to Mahsa's funeral in her hometown. Videos online show women taking off their headscarves in solidarity and people shouting death to the dictator. According to reports, security forces then shot at the crowd. Protests then spread across 139 cities in all 31 provinces in Iran. These demonstrations marked the most serious challenge to the Iranian government since the 1979 revolution. I wanted to know why so many people resonated with Mahsa's death across the world, so I got in contact with the director of Iran Human Rights, Mahmood.
I felt the same anger as millions of Iranians, and I'm sure millions across the world. And I think that's what triggered I would say one of our time's biggest human rights movement.
The protests in Iran were met with force and repression by authorities. Around 22,000 people have been arrested and more than 500 killed since September. There have also been at least 7 executions. Young people were often leading the protests. I spoke to one Iranian activist in the UK who's been involved in the protests.
Most of the people who were out protesting were in our generation. They were Gen Z protesters. So for their whole lives, they didn't know anything but the Islamic regime, but they have the same access as me and you to TikTok, to Instagram. They do the trends, they do the TikTok dance trends. So I think that just says a lot about the passion and the drive in Gen Z to go and get the rights that they know it's their birthright.
Social media was flooded with people across the world showing solidarity, with some people cutting their hair and others calling for action. The Iranian government said that the protests were a conspiracy by their foreign enemies. But human rights groups say that Iranians are calling for accountability over Mahsa's death and want an overhaul of the system. So what has changed in Iran since Mahsa Amini's death? Following the protests, as many as 1 in 5 women in Tehran are not wearing their hijab. This is a massive change and would have been unthinkable before the protests.
One of the major things that happen is that people are not going to go back to the way the society was before Gina's death. That's a turning point for the culture, for the society as a whole. Walking down the streets of Tehran or like a lot of cities in Iran, it feels like walking down in Cairo or Delhi, which is like a lot of catcalling. As a woman, you don't feel safe and all of that. And throughout last year, women been persistently going out on the streets in different cities in Iran and not wearing hijab as a way of defying the government.
But these changes have been met with resistance. For a while, the so-called morality police were taken off the streets following Mahsa Amini's death, but they're now back, using CCTV cameras and facial recognition to penalise anyone who's not following the rules. There's also been a crackdown on academics and activists in the lead up to the one-year anniversary. Some have been put into custody and others have lost their jobs. Activists remain defiant, with protests expected in Iran and across the world on the 16th of September to mark Mahsa Day.
So as we're approaching the one-year anniversary, I think all of the Iranian diaspora are eagerly waiting to see what's going to happen in Iran.
I think those women and girls are so brave and fed up that they're not gonna stop. It doesn't matter what happens next. They understand that their existence relies on the change that needs to happen.
1 year on from Mahsa's death, she's been called a symbol for women's rights and freedoms across the world. Following her death, Mahsa's father told the BBC,
I remember her eyes when she said goodbye to me for the last time. She was an angel. She was about to start her university.
You can follow all of our coverage marking the 1 year anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death on the News Movement's social media platforms.